Welcome into the Brand Partial Show. So let's talk some NFL football. So I wanted to start talking about the Cleveland Browns, and to me, Cleveland. What really excites me is watching Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So if you remember Dorian Thompson-Robinson, interesting story coming out. Played several years at UCLA for Chip Kelly. To me, I think this is a guy who, I remember Chris Sims called this in his NFL draft rankings. And this is why I love Chris Sims' NFL draft rankings, because he kind of goes by what he thinks. He doesn't listen to what the media is saying. So I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the way he's playing right now, I think is a lot of people should have seen this coming. If you look at, he's got a skill set that, is he as talented, maybe as naturally talented as Lamar Jackson? Probably not. Or Watson, who a guy who he's competing with in his own teammate? Probably not. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson has a skill set where I think he can have success in the National Football League, and I think that the way he played in the preseason was something that that shouldn't have really come to much of a surprise. This is a guy who, you see him, he can make people miss in the open field. He's got a good arm. He plays confidently. So many years, and this is a guy who just a lot of experience. Like, you look at Joe Burrow. By the time he got to the NFL, even though he didn't really play much at Ohio State, this is a guy who 2 full seasons at LSU. He's older, he's mature. Same with Thompson-Robinson. Older, mature guy, played a lot of college football. Bill Parcells was a believer in guys playing a lot of football in college. So to me, that is kind of what is worrisome with Anthony Richardson. He just has not played a lot of football. But with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, you get a guy that's played a lot of football, and I expect bright things. And you get the feel that if Dorian Thompson-Robinson keeps developing, I think maybe in the back of the Cleveland Browns coaching staff, this might be a little outlandish statement to make, but maybe deep down you hope that Dorian Thompson-Robinson can really push Deshaun Watson and push him to keep getting better. I think Watson is a guy that is motivated to get better and play at a high level, but having a guy like Dorian Thompson-Robinson to push him, I think, is always a good thing. And they got Josh Dobbs too. Right now appears on the depth chart, Watson QB1, and then Josh Dobbs 2, and then you got Dorian Thompson-Robinson 3. So, but yeah, you get the feel that Dorian Thompson-Robinson could win that backup job. So, you got to as a Browns fan, you got to like what you've seen from Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You got to be excited. The way that Watson played in the few snaps he had, he looked pretty crisp. So, yeah, Cleveland Browns, it's a roster. I like the Cleveland Browns roster. I just don't love it. And to me, their draft was really so indicative of the way I feel about their team. It was a draft where, number one, like this year and last year, they've taken a lot of Ohio State players, which, like with the Eagles taking Georgia players, can be a good thing. Sometimes can be a good thing. Sometimes can be maybe a not so good thing, because you think about that strategy, and it sounds like a good strategy when you speak it out loud. Like, we're gonna take good players, some probably elite players from the best college team, and you think just by default it's gonna translate to us just accumulating more and more talent. But not all good players at high profile college teams become good NFL players. So even though it is a strategy that a lot of times I think can be safe, like getting guys like DeJuan Jones, Luke Whippler. Like, I think DeJuan Jones could be a good player, but Luke Whippler, could he be a solid starter? Like, how does he when will he play for the Cleveland Browns? Because this is a team that returns a strong core nucleus of offensive linemen. So, and then you look at a guy like Tommy Togiai. Tommy Togiai has had some flashes, made a play in the last preseason game, but to me, yeah, you draft some Ohio State players, draft some good players, players that you think will be good, but do they have? How many of them really have that high end of upside? Like, that's the thing. We talk about the Georgia defense being one of the best all time, but still, even the all time great defenses, not every guy becomes a superstar in the NFL. Like Florida State, for example, 2013, there was some good players a lot of good college players on defense, but how many of them became superstars in the NFL? Like Jalen Ramsey, but you look at some guys like Terrence Smith, Timmy Jernigan, some of the key guys on the team. Not all of them develop into superstars. So, yeah, I think that the Browns, not having first round picks really hurts you, but yeah, you kind of. taking so many guys from Ohio State is concerning. But yeah, their draft, I mean, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I really like. Just touched that. The way I've talked about him, you should say I love that pick. But yeah, I like that pick. It's one of those things like, when's Thompson-Robinson going to play? If Watson is the long-term answer, which it appears so, like it appears like he's in better shape this year, moving in the right direction. When does Thompson-Robinson get on? When is he would get his opportunity to make an impact and play for this team? So, but yeah, I mean, Cleveland Browns. The one thing I'll say about the Cleveland Browns roster is you got to love having a guy like Myles Garrett that just anchors this team. So you feel like just having Myles Garrett on this roster gives this team a pretty high floor for the most part. You know that you're not going to be too bad with a guy like Myles Garrett just because he's so disruptive, such an elite game changer at the defensive end position, so dominant in what he does that you got to believe that's going to keep the Browns are still going to have a high floor defensively. But yeah, Wusu Karmoa is a guy you hope he takes another step this year. Maurice Hurst is a guy they brought in. He looked pretty good in the preseason. Hopefully he makes the roster and can contribute. Phillips back at D tackle, and then Jacob Phillips at linebacker too. Jacob Phillips, guy that's been okay. Maybe he can improve this year. Does he become maybe a guy that they move on from? Maybe Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit's been solid. Hopefully he continues to get better. Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome in the secondary. Emerson was a guy they took in last year's draft to enters his second year. But yeah, those are guys that I think Emerson, Delpit, Newsome, it was solid picks, but they're guys that, to me, they were picks where I feel like you make the pick and you know the guy that's has got a pretty high floor. But to me, those are guys where you're kind of just searching a little too much to hope they break out. Now, Grant Delpit, could he break out? Could Newsome or Emerson really break out? Maybe, but I think those guys you've seen enough that they kind of are who they are at this point. So to me, I guess the Cleveland Browns outside of Myles Garrett, there's a lot of guys you're hoping that can really break out and take their game to the next level. So at least for Cleveland, though, there is some sure things. Myles Garrett is an absolute stud. The offensive line going to be strong again. Hopefully it stays healthy with Teller, Batonio, some of the guys in the offensive line. The wide receiver core, should be solid. Cedric Tillman looked pretty good in preseason. Hopefully he can continue to get better. The running back room has depth. You got Nick Chubb. So at least there is some sure things on this Cleveland team. So Nick Chubb, maybe the best running back in football, strong offensive line, then one of the best defensive ends. So at least there's several things with this Cleveland Browns roster you can hang your hat on. Boxes, whatever terminology you want to use, you have boxes checked, you have sure things. So I think that's really cool with the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, you worry that the Browns are, there's just too many just kind of I don't want to say average Joes, but just kind of but too many guys that are just kind of out there as bodies. I'll throw in Denzel Ward too. I guess that's what's weird about the Browns roster. It's different, multiple difference makers with a bunch of just solid pieces. So to me, I think that's why Cleveland. To me, I think what this boils down to is, how good can does Deshaun Watson really have does he look like, if he looks like the Watson of old, I think that is crucial for the Browns becoming dominant or becoming a legit playoff, maybe Super Bowl contender this year. If Watson looks anything like the Watson in his peak in Houston a few years ago, I think that's the key ingredient for the Cleveland Browns making some noise this season. But all right, let's shift to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Tampa Bay, you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they had a draft that I think they got kind of back on track, drafting well. Cody Mock and Kalijah Kancey were two really good players they drafted. I think Kalijah Kancey's a guy that I think they're both picks that really fill needs. I think when you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's kind of, you kind of get a little bit of the vibes of the Cleveland Browns. And I guess so I've defended the Tampa Bay Buccaneers not being the worst team in football next year, like some project. And I think Vegas odds may have them projected to be the worst team in the NFL. But I think you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense and you go, like, you look at it initially and you get excited. Not necessarily excited, but you kind of get content. Like, okay, we got Devin White, Vita Vea, Carlton Davis, Antoine Winfield Jr. We got good players. But then you also look at it like, and when you start thinking about it deeply, you kind of start to question a little bit. Like, Devin White's coming off his worst year in the NFL. He's a guy who just didn't look like the same player last year. Winfield, I wouldn't say he took a step back, but maybe was not as dominant and didn't look necessarily as good as he did his rookie year. Not that he wasn't good. And then Carlton Davis, a good player too, but is Carlton Davis one of the feared corners in the NFL? No. And then you look at who's the other corner they have, the really fat Jamal Dean. You look at Jamal Dean and you go, yeah, Jamal Dean, a good player, but is he a guy that is a true, shutdown elite corner or has the potential to develop into that? No. And then you look at the defensive line. Yeah, Vita Vea, and then you hope Cansey can really turn into something good. And then Tryon Shianka is a good player, but you look at the defensive line, and you go, yeah, it's going to be good, but is it really feared? So I guess that is the kind of that is the theme I'm kind of going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's it should be a good overall defense, but is it a defense where week in and week out offensive coordinators and offenses are really going to stay awake at night in fear of it? And do they really have that one or two guys that the offenses are really going to have to account for? Like, I don't know how many players they had ranked in the NFL top 100, but I did not see as many guys as in years past. And you look 2020 when they won the Super Bowl, that was, to me, that might have been a little bit of Tom Brady was pushing guys like Devin White and Winfield as a rookie. That's when you saw those guys really reach. I think that was a lot of their ceiling is what we saw in those years, which, I don't want to be too negative, but you hope that 2020, 2021, when Winfield, White, Carlton Davis were playing at their best, even Jamal Dean, guys like that were having some of their best seasons. You hope that is not their ceiling, and you hope that's not their absolute ceiling. And you hope that they can still continue to play at a high level, and you hope that this Tampa Bay team, without Tom Brady, without that strong leader at quarterback, hopefully this Tampa Bay team can continue to get better and play really well as a not only as a whole defense but as a whole team. So. But yeah, I think Cody Mock made sense on the interior offensive line. The offensive line outside of Tristan Wirfs kind of was, it was looking like it was going to start to deteriorate. So you get a guy like Cody Mock, guy that played tackle in the FCS school, was at North Dakota State, I believe. But yeah, guy that's a really good athlete. I think he does project well to a guard in the NFL. So yeah, I really like Cody Mock's game. Running back, they drafted Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker, if you remember, had a really nice career at Syracuse. So I've kind of heard mixed things about Sean Tucker. I didn't see his runs in preseason, but just based off of all the tape I've seen on Sean Tucker, I think that this is a guy who definitely could be, should make the roster. I say should. He might, maybe he doesn't, but you look at the running back room is a little bit. Some talented guys, some depth, but, you're kind of, where is there's not a really elite playmaker at running back. Rashad White, I think, is a solid player. Hopefully, I think that's, for Tampa Bay, not that you don't always want to sell, hope is more just a feeling, but you're really, the word I should be used is expecting. You really should be expecting that Sean Tucker is going to be that guy that can be the dual, the receiver, run between the tackles guy, and really be that strong running back that this team needs. But yeah, I mean, a wide receiver should be strong on paper. Wide receiver it's kind of like the point I made with the defense. You look on paper, you go, yeah, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen Durden. you look on paper and you go, yeah, I mean, strong looking wide receiver. But then you get into the season and, not to be too negative here, but Chris Godwin, the guy that's banged up in a lot of games, Mike Evans getting older. Is this the year that both those guys or one of those guys or both those guys, takes a step back? So to me, yeah, Tampa Bay is the ultimate, kind of like the Browns. You look at them on paper and you immediately are kind of start, nodding your head like, okay. Based, I guess it's a lot of guys with a track record, but then, yeah, you look at the Tampa Bay roster and that, like the offensive line, like Cody Mock, we got Tristan Wirfs, but then the rest of the offensive line, you kind of go, I don't know. And then tight end, I don't know. Running back, I don't know. Defense, outside of, some of the guys I mentioned, defense, I don't know. Like, so to me, Tampa Bay, I think, it's so hard. Tampa Bay is one of the toughest teams, in my opinion, to project how they're going to do this year. My guess would be I don't think this will be a good team. Maybe it's a 5-6 win team, but I guess that's definitely a step back. But I don't do I see this team. I have a hard time believing this is a team that's just going to fall apart and be like a 1, 2, 3 win team. You feel like 5 or 6 win team. Like, to me, I think this will be a team that's has a down year, has a bad year, but I think they're still, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think they're still going to be competitive, and I still think they'll probably win some games they shouldn't, but I think they will. They'll probably lose some games that they're favored in, and I feel I have a hard time picking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win the NFC South this year. All right, let's shift gears. So the San Francisco 49ers played the Raiders today, and I really wanted to see, the 49ers are an intriguing team to watch some preseason football because I'm just excited to see how Sam Darnold does. See how Sam Darnold plays. I listened to Kyle Shanahan's press conference. He said Sam Darnold looks better and better each day. So I'm thinking that really gets me excited for the 49ers. And, the 49ers, it all starts with, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. To me, if you want a really good NFL team, like I think those are two pieces to really start with. That's a lot easier said than done to get two guys like Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. But if you have an elite defensive end and an elite linebacker, elite middle linebacker, that is a really nice starting point. So to me, those two guys really anchor that defense. So when I think of the 49ers defense, I immediately think of Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. So yeah, I love the 49ers roster. So I was saying earlier, you look at, even the offensive line, even though there's question marks, Trent Williams clears up a lot of question marks on the offensive line. And then, yeah, they've done a really nice job. What I like about the 49ers is they've missed on some draft picks. Like I thought Trey Sermon, you're obviously going to miss on some guy. I thought Trey Sermon was not the right pick, and it turns out now he's in Philadelphia, might not make the roster, even though Sermon was a guy that had a nice career at Oklahoma and Ohio State. They have had some misses like that. Like you could in the D tackle they took from South Carolina. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but he's another guy you can argue that they've missed on. The receiver from Arizona State they got, Ayuk. Ayuk has had flashes, but he never has really developed into that elite difference maker at receiver. Now, Kyle Shanahan's more optimistic with Ayuk that he can get better. So, 49ers have had some misses. They've had some Javon Kinlaw. Kinlaw was the guy I'm thinking of. So the 49ers have had some misses, but they've also had some hits too. So I think that's in Lynch, Shanahan, they're guys that, they understand where they've made a mistake, and they understand that, they seem to be guys that are just always moving, always doing things to move forward, always doing things to get better, kind of like the Eagles. The Eagles and 49ers obviously are some of the best teams in the NFL, but there's a reason they're the best teams. They're taking risks and always trying to push forward, always trying to do things to get better, acknowledge where you made a mistake, but not be afraid to make mistakes. So I think that's what's really cool about the San Francisco 49ers. I'm excited to see how they do today. Drake Jackson, we'll see if he takes another step in his development. They got Charvarius Ward, too, at corner. He's a really nice player. Sounds like Javon Hargrave is doing some nice things, and they're really excited to see how he does. So Shanahan was talking about, sounds like Kittle's dealing with an injury, missed practice. Sounds like this week, maybe part of next week. Drake Greenlaw, and Drake Jackson dealing with some minor injuries. So yeah, San Francisco. Hopefully excited to see Darnold today. I wonder if we'll see Brock Purdy at all in this game. But yeah, and then Hufanga, really nice play this year at the safety position. So yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot to I don't really have to go on and on about the 49ers. You know, it's going to be a really good football team this year. And, they bring a lot of intrigue with all the quarterbacks they have. Year 2 of Brock Purdy, who really exceeded everyone's expectations, being Mr. Irrelevant. So, yeah, 49ers play the Raiders today at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We'll see who plays for the 49ers, and we'll see how they do. We'll see how some of the younger rookies do, like wide receiver Ronnie Bell. They took Jair Brown, the rookie safety out of Penn State. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Who plays in that game at 4, and we'll see how well they play. All right, so let's talk Philadelphia Eagles. For me, what was really cool about the Eagles is I love seeing all the rookies out there. Keely Ringo, Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter really made a nice play where he blew past the guard and got pressure on the quarterback. Nolan Smith out there. Nolan Smith is a guy that you just got to respect how hard the guy plays. Big fan of Nolan Smith's game. I think he's a really good talent. I think that was a pick that, to me, he was sliding in the draft, but to me, I was not really surprised that Roseman made that move, because Howie Roseman's a guy he's all about taking risks. So we talk about, like, they bring in DeAndre Swift, okay? To me, like, they didn't give up much in the trade. You think, immediately as a Lions, if you're, being pessimistic as a Lions fan like I was, you think, well, DeAndre Swift, guy that just, is dealt with a lot of injuries, missed too many games. We think from the Eagles' point of view, like, yeah, we could give up a few assets. We could give up minor assets for a guy who's probably will come in and be the most talented running back on our roster. And to me, that's like, you talk about taking risks with the 49ers and Eagles. Those are the risks you kind of have to make to really win in the NFL today, because the NFL is so close, it's so competitive. You see so many games come down to a point, 2 points, 3 points. So those are the kind of risks you have to take. And Howie Roseman, like I just touched on a little earlier, he's a guy that's, made some mistakes and learned from them, and continues to do things to move forward in the right direction. So, yeah, like you bring in Marcus Mariota. Like, I think Mariota, despite what people say about Mariota's play in the NFL, he is a guy who I think is a really nice backup to Jalen Hurts. Like, I think he'll fit in really well if Hurts gets banged up and he has to come in. You look at the receiving core. Receiving core is really strong with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. So, yeah, I mean, the Eagles, once, I say, once you get good, then you can take some more of those risks. Like, Jalen Carter was a risky pick, even though there's high upside there. But you have Jordan Davis, the rookie, who was hurt a little bit last year. Davis is a really good player. You have Fletcher Cox, a veteran at defensive tackle, Brandon Graham, a veteran. So you got some veterans in there. Why not take some risks on some guys that, might not play right away, but down the road have a really bright future? And Keely Ringo, Nolan Smith, Sidney Brown. Maybe Sidney Brown does make an impact. I didn't really follow how he played, but Sidney Brown, a really talented safety too, played at Illinois. He was one of the incoming rookies this year. A guy that's a really tough physical tackler, not afraid to work through traffic. So, big fan of the Eagles draft. I've touched on that a lot. Sidney Brown, I think, probably the most underrated player that they took in this past year's draft. Sidney Brown just was not getting a lot of hype during the draft process, but a really talented player nonetheless, and I think he does have a bright future in the NFL. So, yeah, we'll see. The Eagles will certainly be an interesting team. Hopefully, Nakobe Dean takes another step in his development and continues to get better. So, yeah, I really, really like the Eagles roster overall. But yeah, the Eagles going to be up there. Them in the four. You just when you think top teams in the NFC, you immediately think Eagles, 49ers. So yeah, Eagles going to be really strong once again. They're going to have a really stout team, and it's going to be really exciting to see how they perform. So I wanted to talk about this for a minute. I want to touch on the Johnny Manziel documentary. So, I kind of went back and forth for years, and I know Johnny Manziel, he played years ago when I was in high school. I didn't really have as much experience in scouting and kind of understanding how to evaluate players. But, I guess my final conclusion with Johnny Manziel would be I think he did have enough talent to succeed in the NFL because scouting, what I've learned scouting now is if you watch guys that have a really high level traits in high school and skill set like Johnny Manziel showed, like ability to break long runs, ability to make people miss, throw on the run, throw accuracy, short range, intermediate range, long range, throw from different arm angles, all the skill set that Johnny Manziel showed in high school, I think it translated. Not only did it translate to college, I think it was there for him to really develop in the NFL. But I think I guess what I'm getting at, Johnny Manziel had the talent to succeed in the NFL. I think the work ethic, the partying, drinking is what did Johnny Manziel in, because the NFL. I always said his story kind of reminds me of Vince Young a little bit with Johnny Manziel. You can get to the college level on talent alone. The NFL is where you have to combine talent with the strong work ethic, almost like the killer alpha mindset. You see it with some players like Jamar Chase. I think that was missing from Johnny Manziel. You can't just do what he did, just go to practice, watch zero tape. So I think that's what really weeded Johnny Manziel out in the NFL, even though Johnny Manziel, a huge fan of what he did at Texas A&M. He's going to go down as a legend for that upset win against Alabama in 2012 when they beat the number one ranked Crimson Tide. And then the next year, they almost beat Alabama again. It was a back-and-forth game. They made a lot of big plays. So he's going to be remembered for a lot of those things he did. But, yeah, Manziel, it's too bad it didn't work out in the NFL. And I was a believer that, if he had the work ethic and the drive in the NFL, I think he could have performed at a high level, and I think he could have been a really strong franchise quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. But now it just begs the question of, what if the work ethic was there? What if there was the drive and the grit to really want to be great? So kind of a story of what if. To me, I think Manziel is he's a guy that needs to find some purpose in his life. I know we're kind of shifting away from football here, but I think he's a guy that needs to find purpose in his life. It looks like he's doing better because kind of is a guy that, look, 2014-15 with the Browns, it really sounds like he was in a dark place. So hopefully Manziel continues to, get better. Looks like he was, living with his family. So, hopefully he finds a passion and a purpose in life kind of beyond football. Inducted to the A&M Hall of Fame. So it looks like he's doing better. He's doing okay. So wish the best for Johnny Manziel. All right, so let's talk the Detroit Lions. So Detroit Lions, kind of like the Eagles, it was really cool to see all the rookies out there. And, Sorsdale looked like he got knocked down a few times. No, I shouldn't. This is one thing, preseason that's the overreaction of preseason. You watch it, Kobe Sorsdale, a couple bad plays that I saw, but I don't know how he's done in practice. I have not heard, so I'm not going to speculate anything. But yeah, I think Kobe Sorsdale kind of reminds me of Cody Mock, a guy that played tackle at a smaller FCS school. Cody Mock was at William and Mary. A really good athlete, though, and the snaps I watched him play against Virginia because I wanted to see him against a Power 5 competition, and it looked like he not only belonged, it looked like he really excelled out there. Gets into his stance quick, or gets into pass sets quick, so a really talented player who's got a pretty solid anchor in pass protection. So, yeah, to me, I'm a fan of Colby Sorsdale. He's one of the many rookies the Lions drafted. And Antoine Green caught a pass had a screen catch. Antoine Green, another guy that I shouldn't say hope. I expect Antoine Green to make the roster. I think this is a guy who, to me, I don't want to say he was necessarily completely forgotten about in the draft process, but he's a guy who, because of some just not playing a lot for whatever reason, he's a guy that he showed a lot of ability, but just his name was just not, there just wasn't the hype there around draft time. And, but he's got a size and a skill set, and the measurables are all there. Was it 4'4", 40, ability to win vertically, gets off the line of scrimmage well. They had a skill set that's all there. I think it's just up to him to show this coaching staff all the abilities he has in practice and make the most of his opportunities right now and the reps he gets, because I think that if he can show that full ability, I think that he certainly should make this roster. So I'm a fan of Antoine Green. I expect him to make the roster. Maybe he doesn't. If he doesn't, that's a huge, you got to believe that, I don't want to, I'm not trying to take a shot at him, but you got to believe that if he doesn't make this roster, it's really, as a man, you should hold yourself accountable for things. But he's a guy that, I think if he doesn't make the roster, it's fully on him. I think there is some guys that, sometimes the coaching staff just doesn't really get a full eval of them. With the trust I have in the Lions evaluations as a coaching staff, as an organization, you feel like that, if Green doesn't make the roster, it's because he doesn't really show that full skill set. And maybe that's what hindered his playing time in North Carolina. Now I don't want to attribute it to work ethic, because I don't know what his work ethic looks like. I see on Instagram he posts pictures of him working out, so obviously he does. I mean, every guy works out. So, but to me, if a guy is not playing as much, sometimes it's the coaching staff's fault. Maybe it's a work ethic concern. Maybe I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is there is some question marks I have with Antoine Green, but I do have, high expectations for him. And I have seen enough on tape that he could be a really good player and a potential difference maker. Maybe not this year, but down the road for the Detroit Lions. And then Jahmyr Gibbs played a little bit too. I was happy to see Jahmyr Gibbs out there. I think it's interesting that the Lions, they were one of the teams that, I don't know this for sure, but it sounds like them and some other teams had Jahmyr Gibbs ranked higher than Bijan Robinson, which, this comes as a surprise as many, but it's one of those things where the NFL draft, you get fed Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is the number one back for several years now, that you have a hard time straying away from that opinion. It's like in psychology, there's like a term for it. Once you come to a conclusion, or a strong conclusion, you need a lot of evidence to really change that opinion or that conclusion. So to me, a lot of people just had it locked in as Bijan Robinson, the number one running back. And to me, I actually, I can't fault him. I actually, maybe I would still have Bijan Robinson number one. I think Jahmyr Gibbs showed enough in college where it was closer than he made it. He was close. I think the bottom line, this is just my opinion, but if you guys have a differing one, I'm happy to hear. I think Jahmyr Gibbs was actually really close. Not really close, but I think he was close to Bijan Robinson. I probably still say Bijan Robinson is a little better, but I think that, just because people had it so locked in their minds that Bijan Robinson was better, I think people had a hard time even grasping that Jahmyr Gibbs was close to Bijan Robinson. But Jahmyr Gibbs, I talk about Antoine Green. Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of the same conversation. The tools are all there for Jahmyr Gibbs to succeed. He's just gotta put it all together. Georgia Tech flashed a lot of ability, but was still under the radar because Georgia Tech just is not getting the spotlight as much as opposed to Alabama. But even at Alabama, I think he missed one game this year. It was a game. He either missed one. It was a game or a game and a half this year at Alabama, and his stats weren't necessarily eye-popping this year, even though when he played, he was impactful, especially in the Arkansas game. But yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, a guy who, under the radar, really good season. at Georgia Tech, and then a season this year that was good, but just not eye-popping stats. So I think a lot of that contributed to him not necessarily being under the radar, because he was still considered the number 2 back, primarily behind Bijan Robinson. But I think that a lot of that attributed to a lot of people not fathoming that he could be in the same class as Bijan Robinson. So, I guess besides the comparisons with Bijan Robinson, I think Jahmyr Gibbs fits well into this Lions offense. My dad and I were talking about, he is kind of an upgrade. He potentially should be an upgrade from DeAndre Swift, and David Montgomery potentially should be an upgrade from Jamal Williams. So I think David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, those are 2 guys that have an excellent skill set, and I think they're going to really contribute. I think they're really going to be a really strong running back duo this year. But yeah, anything else I wanted to touch on with the Lions? So the linebacker, let's talk the linebacker position for the Lions. I think it's interesting. So Derek Barnes, I worry that he's going to get cut. Derek Barnes was a guy who, it's too bad that his plays he just hasn't really gotten better. And not that Derek Barnes is a bad player, but he is a guy who, he plays pretty well on special teams. He's a guy who I thought would, as much as he flashed as a rookie, I thought he could take another step and be keep getting better. But it looked like, Barnes, like my dad and I touched on, I don't think Barnes is a long-term answer, sadly, for the Detroit Lions. So I think that hopefully, if they choose to cut him, I wish him the best, but I don't think it's, to me, I guess, where does he kind of fit in with this linebacking core? You feel like it's going to be, Rodriguez, Anzalone, and then Jack Campbell's probably pushing Anzalone. I think my dad had the best point. Rodriguez is a guy you have to have on the field. So to me, maybe it's Jack Campbell pushing Anzalone. But Jack Campbell is still a guy who, it sounds like he's getting better, but I think he's a guy that, he still looks, I just saw like a couple snaps, but he looks, it looks like the NFL is still a little bit fast for him. So hopefully things continue to slow down for Campbell. And Campbell, I think, with his skill set, I think he's a guy that's got a high ceiling, guy that can continue to get better and better. So I'm a believer in Jack Campbell. I think he's got a chance to be a really good linebacker in the NFL. But all right, let's talk the New York Jets. And with the Jets, let's talk some Hard Knocks. So Jets featured on Hard Knocks. I thought that episode was really good. Aaron Rodgers. I'm excited for Jets fans, how excited they are to have Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you saw that one practice, they were chanting his name for practically the whole practice. Aaron Rodgers just, I love the confidence he has. A lot of people say Aaron Rodgers is cocky, but, when you've won 4 MVPs and you have the talent and skill set Aaron Rodgers has, I think it's okay to be a little bit cocky. I think, this is a guy who just, he knows deep down he's the man. Maybe not even deep down. He's, he shows it a little bit that he is the man. But I think that, I think Aaron Rodgers is interesting. I think he's a guy that, is not overly cocky, but just cocky enough in ways that it does annoy people. And I think he is kind of, there is times I think he is humble too. So he's kind of just got those, that kind of weird mix of times when he's humble and times when he is a little overly cocky, and some of the things he says kind of rub people the wrong way. Not even rub people the wrong way. They do kind of piss people off. Like, with the Bears fans when he said, "I still own you." So, but yeah, back to the Jets. As far as football goes, I think Garrett Wilson, I think, maybe Garrett Wilson doesn't develop into a top 3-5 receiver in the NFL. Garrett Wilson, to me, with his mindset and his skill set, I think he's going to be a really good wide receiver for a long time. I think this is a guy who's going to be, we're talking years down the road to say, oh, Garrett Wilson, yes, this guy's had a heck of a career, just been a solid, consistent wide receiver for a long time. This guy that just, he's a guy that's just, with his competitiveness and the way he gets after it, he's fit in everywhere. In high school, this guy that just put up massive numbers in the Texas area, comes into Ohio State, makes an impact as a freshman right away. And now with the New York Jets, he comes into New York and looks like he's a guy that just looks like he belongs at every level. And a guy that, like if you put him on any team in the NFL, he would make an impact right away. I know that sounds like a kind of a no-brainer statement, but to me, I think that's more so just a testament to this guy just has a quick ability to adapt and just get after it and find ways to make an impact. So, yeah, Garrett Wilson, excellent wide receiver. That's one thing Hard Knocks hammered home. I think that was awesome that the Jets took the top two rookies in the draft. The Jets were so bad a drafting team for a long time. I think, arguably the worst drafting team from 2012 to 2020, 2021. And then Joe Douglas comes in and all he does is get guys like Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Ahmad Gardner, Jeremy Rucker. Hopefully he continues or hopefully he takes another step this year. So Jets roster that, I guess the burning question for the New York Jets is, number one is Robert Saleh going to become a very good elite coach? I think Robert Saleh has proved at this point he's a good coach, but I think the big burning question is, does Aaron Rodgers put this team over the top? Does Aaron Rodgers make this a Super Bowl team? And it's the ultimate question I can't wait to be answered. And it's a question that you might not get the answer to this year. Kind of depends on, if Aaron Rodgers stays multiple years, he's going to have obviously multiple cracks at it. But it's a question that, we might not get answered this year, but this year will be, even if that question is not answered this year will give us a lot of evidence of how good this team can be with Aaron Rodgers. So I love what the Jets have done overall, and it's a defense that I'm excited to see them have a strong defense, because there was some years where they had some pieces defensively, and they had just games where they fell apart. I remember a Monday night game years ago, and Andrew Luck just torched them. I forget, that was when Todd Bowles was the coach, and I'm thinking the Jets, they've had talent on defense for a number of years, and just they have games where they just have fallen apart. Now, maybe you attribute some of that to coaching. Maybe you attribute to some of that to some of the guys were older at the time. Like I think that was when they had David Harris at linebacker. So you kind of attribute some of those things. There's kind of like excuses I guess you can make for them. But you look at the Jets team this year, and it's young too. This is not just a veteran, not just an older, an aging, veteran defense. It's a younger defense. I mean, you look at guys like, even C.J. Mosley. He's an older guy in the defense, but I think C.J. Mosley's got a couple good years in him, potentially. You look at, the defensive line, Quinnen Williams is developing into one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. So there's just so many things going the Jets' way that you absolutely love. So drafting well. Quinnen Williams keeps taking steps as far as becoming one of the best defensive tackles like we thought. a former top 5 pick in the 2019 NFL draft. You got talent at wide receiver. I wouldn't say probably, well, in my opinion, the best cornerback in football in Ahmad Gardner. So, and then hopefully, if the Jets, if everything, if the dominoes all fall in the right direction for the Jets, Mekhi Becton stays healthy this year and makes an impact. And then the rookie, Will McDonald. Will McDonald, he was a guy that, when I initially watched his tape, I was like, looks like a good player. But as I dove deep into his tape, he's a really good edge rusher. And I love that the Jets made that pick getting Will McDonald, because to me, that was a pick where, like, if you're the New York Jets, you're like, offensive line's on the top of your mind. But, like, we also want to get a really good player. So why not get a guy like Will McDonald? And, So that's just kind of the hope. I know I keep using the term hoping, but that's kind of the thing that, let's just keep I know we had to worry about needs a little bit too, but let's just keep drafting good players, and then that's kind of, and then we'll expect things to kind of fall in our favor. Like Mekhi Becton stays healthy this year. Elijah Vera Tucker plays at a high level at guard. So to me, drafting Will McDonald, I really like that they drafted Will McDonald. I like that they didn't stretch for an offensive lineman. I know they could have. There was a talented offensive lineman on the board. I don't remember exactly who, but there definitely was some guys. Like you look at Anton Harrison was still there. So like that they did not stretch for an offensive lineman and took Will McDonald. But so let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. So I'm a full believer in the New Orleans Saints this year. Derek, I'm watching the preseason games going on right now, and I'm watching Derek Carr. And well, the first thing I was surprised about is the Saints playing their starters. But I'm watching Derek Carr, and I'm going, he looks excited out there. He looks comfortable out there, not too comfortable, because you don't want to be too comfortable. But he looks, looks like he's maybe this is kind of like the ultimate revival for Derek Carr's career. I'm sure some people have made that point, but I'm thinking about Derek Carr, and I'm thinking like, is Derek Carr just been? Was the Raiders? Are the Raiders going to fall apart without Derek Carr, and we're going to find out that Derek Carr kind of was the more holding that team more so into place than Derek Carr was just not really that good. I think you're going to see more so the case that Derek Carr is a good quarterback. The Raiders maybe were just that bad of a team overall, and that Derek Carr was really, kind of lifting them up as opposed to them lifting, not lifting Derek Carr up, but how should I say this? More so that the Raiders were actually decent and just Derek Carr wasn't that good. I think it was more so Derek Carr is a good quarterback. He was just kind of he was having to fill a lot of the holes in the Raiders team. So, you look at the Saints. The Saints are a team that, maybe there's not as many elite difference makers as you hope, but you look at the Saints team and they really check all the boxes. Offensive line. Offensive line should be good. Ramczyk, a talented tackle. Cesar Ruiz in the interior. Hopefully he continues to get better. You look at Juwan Johnson moving to tight end. He sounds like he's made a lot of buzz in camp. You look at running back, Alvin Kamara. I know he's going to be suspended, but Alvin Kamara, his play speaks for itself. Look at wide receiver, Michael Thomas, talented guy. I know the injuries have been a reoccurring theme later now in his career, and Chris Olave. They're check, offensive line check, quarterback check, running back. There's really, I guess how I should sum it up with the Saints. There's really not a lot of weaknesses to this team now. Before they drafted Brian Brzee this year, you could argue that the Saints' weakness was the defensive interior, but Brian Brzee, I think, is going to clear up a lot of holes as far as that's concerned. I think that's a perfect pick for the New Orleans Saints, not just to fill a need, but to also get a high-end level player, because, Brian Brzee, to me, even if Brian Brzee does not become a really dominant presence in the interior, Brian Brzee, I think, has a high floor just because he's such a unique skill set. Brian Brzee was one of the more polarizing, interesting players this year. Former 5-star, just a big body, athletic, and just plugs up a lot of space inside. It's rare that you see a guy that big that can move like that athletic. So I think Brian Brzee is just going to create a unique challenge on the interior for opposing offenses that I think is really going to help this New Orleans Saints team. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how he does. Sounds like I'm listening to Dennis Allen. Sounds like Isaiah Foskey's not as far along as I'd hope. Foskey's not a guy that I loved, but I think, to me, he's just, I know I say this statement a lot, but I think Foskey has a chance to just be a really solid starter in the NFL. I think that he is solid against the run. This is not a guy he doesn't present a unique challenge as far as with speed and power combination, but he is a talented player nonetheless. And I think he's got a fairly bright future in New Orleans. And then, you look at, Demario Davis, talented linebacker. So the defensive line, you still got guys like Granderson, Passano. So defensive line, I guess, is the concern, but linebacker should be really solid. Demario Davis and Pete Warner, and then the secondary should be really strong. Hopefully all guys stay healthy with Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu. I really like what was the guy they drafted? Paulson Adebo, too, the guy they drafted from Stanford. So you look at the Saints, and they really check all the boxes to be a really good team this year. Hopefully it all comes together for them. All right, so yeah, I got some time here. Let's talk the New York Giants. So the one big bright spot for the New York Giants is Deonte Banks, the corner they drafted. I was watching him play a little bit in the preseason. Had a tackle, had a nice physical tackle. I think Deonte Banks is going to be. I think he'll be a critical part if the Giants do something special this year, like a big playoff run, because they've drafted some guys in the secondary that really just have not become superstars, like guys like Xavier McKinney. They have, I don't know, McKinney's been okay, but just they need a guy like, I think Deonte Banks is the perfect pick there. Let's get a guy who's got some high upside in that secondary. So hopefully Deonte Banks has a really good year this year, and hopefully has a really good, strong career for him. But yeah, I mean, the Giants, I'd say at this point it is a good roster. Saquon Barkley, one of the better running backs in the NFL. Hopefully Daniel Jones continues to move in the right direction. So to me, I think with the New York Giants is, it's a small sample size. Just 1 year of Brian Daboll, 1 year of Daniel Jones showing that he can be a solid starter, competent quarterback, a year of Saquon staying healthy. So to me, I guess the Giants, though, with all the things that went their way, and then probably winning some games that they shouldn't. So you worry about that the Giants are a team where as many things that went their way this year, you worry about that. If things don't go their way this year, then maybe they do take a step back this year. I think Brian Daboll is too good of a coach, and I think they have a too good of an overall roster to take a huge step back, but you feel like a slight step back could be apparent for the New York Giants. Hopefully the tackles, Thomas and Evan Neal, continue to play at a high level. Hopefully Kayvon Thibodeau keeps getting better. Thibodeau, a guy that, I was a huge fan of Thibodeau a couple years ago, but the more I've seen of him, the more I don't think he presents a dominant overall threat to opposing offensive linemen with his skill set, but he is a guy that really understands the position, really understands when to use pass rush moves at the right time. This guy that's just an instinctive football player and can react quickly, strong. Hopefully he's just not just strictly a pass rusher. He needs to get a little bit better against the run. He's not actually a super strong guy at the point of attack as far as when he's trying to hold the point of attack against the run. So hopefully Thibodeau continues to work on some things and get better. You worry that he's kind of hit his ceiling, or you realize that he has kind of a ceiling in the NFL, but hopefully he can show a little bit more ability and be better against the run this season. But yeah, I'm going to wrap with that. Thanks for tuning into the Brand Partial Show. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.